Hello everybody! By the end of this video, you are going to know one of the most important concepts in programming, something that is used literally everywhere. It doesn't matter if it's web development, creating applications, creating games, every single thing that has code, even the stuff that is purely visual, uses what we're going to go over today. Today we are going to be going over variables and functions, because this was the first major roadblock that I had when I first started trying to learn how to code back in middle school. The language that I'm going to be using for this example is JavaScript because that is the most accessible to most people, but everything I'm going over applies to basically every programming language you can use. So we're going to set up a basic HTML document real quick. Now all I'm going to do is make a button and a number, and then we will make our first variable. So even if you don't understand HTML, this is very self-explanatory. We have the number 100, which is just text, and we have a button that I've named damage button, and on click it will deal damage, which doesn't currently do anything. So now, if I refresh this page, there we go. Just to make this a little bit easier for you to see, I will make that centered and bigger. And let's go see what that looks like. Awesome. With this, we now have a much cleaner looking page, although it still doesn't do anything. So now let's get into the main part of the video. That being, what are variables and what are functions? Well, simply put, a variable is a placeholder for a value. What I mean by that is, you can make variables anything. You can make them a number, you could make them text, you can make them a whole ton of data, but whatever you decide to make them, they work more or less the same way in every single language. First, you need to actually say that you're making a variable. So in JavaScript, the way that you do that is you literally type var, var, and we'll just say x equals 5. There you go. That is my first variable. JavaScript, you don't need a semicolon. Some languages you do. That is just proper grammar. Basically, computers won't read it otherwise. We will make var y equal to 10. And there we go. This is programming. So now my variable x is equal to 5, and my variable y is equal to 10. When I was first learning how to program, the biggest reason why I found variables confusing was because I kept thinking that what you called them mattered. So right now, x is equal to 5, y is equal to 10. The only thing that this changes is how I use it. So if I made another variable called added numbers, or variable z, let's say. If I make variable z, right, and then I do z is equal to x plus y. So this means that z is going to be equal to 15. But if I change this to cat and this to dog, this is still 5 and 10. This name just doesn't make sense anymore. And now I would need to change this to cat and dog. And my variable z would still have the same value. What you call your variables is completely up to you. The only thing that it affects is how readable your code is. Because if I take variable z here, and I'm saying it's equal to cat plus dog, now if this was a big long project with a ton of different content in it, you'd have to go find, well, what the hell is variable cat equal to, or variable dog equal to? So yeah, you could call them number 1 and number 2. It does not matter. The only thing that matters is wherever you use it in the project, you have to be consistent. That's it. And what's really important too is code executes top down. So one thing that you can do with your variables, right, is you can actually change it. So say that I wanted to say number 1 equals number 1 plus 5, right? Well, now the next time that I say, let's look at number 1, So we'll do that. Because this is JavaScript, every language has a different way of doing this, but for JavaScript, if I console.log that there, that will be different from if I do it before I execute this code here. So yeah, code executes sequentially top-down, except for when it doesn't. If you're working with that type of stuff, you know what a variable is. So your general rule is code will execute top-down. And that's important to know if you change one variable multiple times. But yeah, you don't even have to make these numbers, by the way. You could make it a string. So, hello. And then you could make that equal to x. And then if we printed that, it would say hello. You could make this some type of array. But that's getting a little bit too in the weeds, I'd say. The main thing is just know all that a variable is something that is holding data for you. And the data that it's holding is based off of whatever you set it equivalent to. There we go. Now I made this button up here, and if you notice, I said that on click, we run deal damage. Well, deal damage doesn't currently exist. So let's do this real quick. Function deal damage. There you go. This is a function. And what a function is it is a placeholder for something actually happening. So what we're going to do first is we're going to actually use these console.logs. So we're going to log number 1, and we're going to get rid of this and move it to here. So I'm going to use this function real quick to show off the fact that code executes sequentially. So now I've got my function, but this isn't actually a number anymore. This is hello. So what happens when I try to add 5 to hello? Well, this is a JavaScript thing. This wouldn't work in most languages. So here we go. I've got hello, and then I've got hello again, and hello 5. All right, to make this a little bit easier for you guys, let's change this back to 5 and change this back to 10. Now, when I press the button, it's going to run that function. And there you go. Now, JavaScript in particular is very good about doing the correct thing without you having to tell it what to do. Despite the fact that this is the same code here, when this was text, which is called a string, it added the number 5 at the end of the text. Now that this is a number, it does basic addition, which that's just kind of a cool little quirk of JavaScript. And you can see if I keep clicking this button, we can keep watching this number go up. Let's make it so that when I click on the deal damage button, it subtracts 10 from this 100. Very easy. So I've added a health variable and I've set it to 100. Now when we click on the damage button, we set health equal to health minus 10. This is most of programming. I know it probably seems very simple, but this is how stuff like video games work. Then we do document.getElementById health number .innerHTML equals health. And the one thing that I do need to do is I need to set this to be, there we go. So all this JavaScript means is look for this ID. So it's going to select this. .innerHTML is just the correct code that lets you change what is inside of here. And we're setting it equal to health. And as you can see, health is equal to health minus 10. Now every time we click deal damage, I need to refresh this page. Now every time we click deal damage, as you can see, the number goes down. There's one final thing that I want to show though, that makes functions make a lot more sense in how they're so useful. And that's an idea called parameters. So in this little section here that was previously blank, we're going to make a parameter called damage amount. This works just like the variables. You can make this anything. As long as you reuse the same exact thing that you wrote, it will work. So we're naming it damage amount because that makes it easy to know what this is supposed to be. So instead of health equaling health minus 10, we're going to make it health equals health minus damage amount. Super simple. And now, imagine you were making a video game, right? By setting this up like this, you could make one thing deal 10 damage, and another thing deal 25 incredibly easily. And the way that you do this is, I'm going to make a second button real quick. So there's going to be two buttons, one that does damage and one that says more damage. I gave them different names, but you don't even have to do that much. They both will call the same function deal damage, but this one will deal 10, and this one will deal 25. And there you go. So functions don't actually do anything until you use them somewhere. If you want to think of it in a different way, when you make a function, it is just sitting there. What you need to do is you need to link it to some sort of event. So most programming is based off of when something happens, do this. So when you make a function, nothing will happen at first. Instead, you make that function in order to do a thing when somebody does something like click a button, hover over something. If you were making a video game, when somebody gives an input. Then if you've got something that you're going to be reusing a lot, you should have a function for it. So that's enough yapping. Let's show off this working. So here's my two buttons, 90, 25. And there you go. So this is the basics of variables and functions and how they work. Hopefully explained in a way that it was easy to follow for somebody who doesn't really care for programming or is just trying to get into it. Because I remember when I was first trying to get into programming, I really struggled with these two concepts at first. Now, granted, it was because most of the people teaching it would do something like make an entire document and act like that was just normal. The only part of this video that you really need to understand if you want to get into coding is defining variables and then making functions, right? That will help you in every single thing you work on, I promise. And just for a final little bit of bonus content, there is another way to define variables that some languages like C and C# or C++ use. They are called constants. I think they're in JavaScript, but not very popular. So a constant is something that once you set it, doesn't really change. So for example, gravity. Chances are pretty good that you don't want to be modifying gravity in the same way that I just modified health. And I use gravity as my example because the idea is if you made a game, your gravity should never really change. So instead of constantly writing 9.8, you can just write gravity, or even grav if you wanted to shorten it further. And then wherever you wanted to use gravity, you don't have to type 9.8. Or if you're making a game that uses a weird gravity, like 5.4, again, if you don't have to type it everywhere. It also makes it much easier to change it, because if I write grav in a billion different places, now all of these values can be changed instantly just by changing this. So, yeah, that's a constant. It's just a different type of variable. I think that's really it. And that is the end of my quick little demonstration. Hopefully this helped you out. I've wanted to make this video for a long time because this really confused little 13-year-old me like 10 years ago. So if this can help even one person get a clearer understanding of variables and functions, I'll consider it worth uploading. Haven't made a programming video in a minute. I've been having a lot more fun making gaming content lately, but this was on my mind, and once it got on my mind, it would not leave. So there we are. Honestly, I'm mostly making this right now because I just made a short asking for help making friends, and I'm a little bit nervous because if I wake up and I check that video, I have a system in place where I only check my videos the next day. That way I'm not like compulsively checking them, and it's blown up and I've got a billion ideas and suggestions and comments to do. I'm a little bit nervous, but yeah, anyway. Better use of energy than worrying about that. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, Until next time, see ya.